Hello and welcome to the RSnake Show Demo Day. We got Keep Aware today with Ryan, and Trey is traveling at the moment, so we'll excuse him for his general aesthetic and audio quality. But so let's just hand it right over to Ryan. Take it away, Ryan.
Awesome. Appreciate it and appreciate the time today. My name is Ryan Berner. I'm the co-founder and CEO of KeepAware. We're a browser security company. If the sales and marketing folks were here, they would say we're in this enterprise browser category that you might keep hearing about. But it touches different areas like web filtering and the SASE space quite a bit. The way that I frame it on the technical side is a detection engineering solution for the browser, giving security teams detection and response capabilities across their various web browsers. So again, appreciate the time, and I'm happy to hop in here.
Great. Well, just take it away.
Awesome. I'll go ahead and share my entire screen so we can bounce to a couple places. Can you see my screen okay?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. So the way I like to break up our platform is I'll touch deployment first. There's more and more browser extensions each day that I think are tying into different security capabilities and solution categories. And so I'll frame ours in the sense that we're an enterprise browser solution for any browser. And so whether it's Chrome, Edge, Firefox, Safari, Brave, the list goes on. We support deploying an extension as a part of a single policy that locks a browser extension to employees' laptops, workstations, as well as our own Chromium-based app for iOS, iPads. Really great for folks who are field workers, might have an iPad, and web applications, SaaS applications that they're accessing in the field. So again, the way this deploys is typically through an MDM. Think Intune, Jamf, group policy, and then it's just subtly locked to an employee's web browser. There's no notification, there's no alert or sign-in that has to be done here. But the security team now has a lot of hooks and capabilities tied into their employees' web browsers. So I'll jump now to the employee experience and then get further into what the security team can do as a function of this. I mentioned a couple areas, web filtering, enterprise browser I'll touch on, but there's also components of DLP and SASE. So the space is still very early on and evolving. But from KeepAware's perspective, much of our team is formally working in a SOC or attached to a SOC. So my own background is that I was a SOC analyst for the Texas A&M University system while I was going to school there. I've always been a programmer, so I studied computer engineering, ended up working in the SOC, I think even a little before I knew what SOC stood for. But I was, using different NDR tools, Vectra, Darktrace, tying those into SIEM, SOAR strategy for the A&M system. And I really love that position. I've always been in the network and email security space. And so when I left that position, I went to actually go be a sales engineer for Darktrace. And the joke there is that I was also unaware of what a sales engineer did when I took that position. So, giving demonstrations, working with customers. I really like the customer side. I helped build out the first integrations engineering team at Darktrace, working between, Demisto, Phantom, CrowdStrike at the time. And I say all of this because what I witnessed as a part of, pandemic, people working from home and just the space, network security space in general, is that a lot of the traditional controls, perimeter defense, a lot of this went out the window when people could just access, like Trey here, working from a hotel room, access everything directly from their browser. And so why I bring all of this up is that we started with more of a detection engineering SOC approach, and that the things that slip through the cracks in other defenses, network, email, otherwise, the browser is that next step for both the employee and if the attacker can get there. And so take a step back here, assuming that threat detection and response is important to the team. This is the next layer in the stack. They add the extension to the browser. And then what we have here is a control plane for the security team. There's some IT capabilities here as well. This is more of for convenience. You can control the new tab page, home page, without necessarily modifying each browser individually. You get this capability across all of them. I'd say it's about half and half with clients that use this capability. Where it's really popular is for shared devices or putting a device in more of a kiosk mode where you want to give them those 5 to 7 things to do in their browser, so they're not exposing themselves to Google searching Facebook login or some sort of application that they're going to get advertised or malvertised through. So there's a bit of a security concern there. But the main idea is that this is...
And just wait, hold on, just so we're following you there. So when they land on the homepage, there will be the apps that are allowed and nothing but the apps are allowed if it's set in that mode. Is that what we're hearing?
You can do both modes. So this could be more of like a bookmarking, just shortcuts, or you can fully restrict the browser to those applications.
That's great. So they're not, as you said, they're not searching around for Amazon SSO, which is a Google search away. There's no one that has that memorized, but or maybe they have a bookmark, maybe, but they're definitely not remembering it. So this would be that quick path to getting them there. And if that's the only thing you wanted them to be working on is controlling some Amazon thing, that's the one button that's accessible to them, let's say.
Right. And I'd say this is where we're closest to where we're seeing enterprise browser take off, so to speak, is that there's these more restrictive environments where you want employees to come in and do these 5 to 7 things or have these core applications that they're using, and you can really lock down that experience. Though there's cases where, for example, a city government, they have in their 911 center all these different dashboards, and I doubt they're Raspberry Pis, but they're these machines that their only capability is to open an Edge browser and show their single app. And so being able to restrict that on a browser level, is another kind of kiosk mode type use case here.
Mm-hmm. Out of curiosity, do you get to know what they are allowing? So do you have like a sort of a census of the kinds of apps that people generally allow?
Yeah. I'd say for, again, there's 2 buckets for this more restrictive environment. The kiosk mode, it's always these internal applications, and so they are a bit more sporadic. One that comes to mind for a security system, something like Verkada, and locking down that interface to that type of dashboard. For employees, what we're seeing popular is the IDP initiated logins. So this is our engineering profile. So we put our AWS SSO there because, like you said, knowing that URL, you'd really have to bookmark it. And then even so, we don't allow people to sign into AWS through username, password. And so having that IDP initiated login is something that we're seeing is pretty common. We don't do this today, but we've had quite a few requests that people just want to pull in their Okta applications, and they already have these assigned to groups, so that's one less step that they'd have to worry about, is just restrict the browser to the Okta applications we've already assigned to this employee.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. So thank you.
Yeah. So the security use case for us here was to prevent people from looking for login pages over Google and Bing, because even down to a regional credit union, we've seen people spoofing those types of websites. And so where we started the company was very much an anti-phishing space. And my first example here from the employee side is a classic, fake invoice that gets through email filtering. Though what we've seen is even if you have strong organization, email protections, people might use their webmail for personal use or again, still things slip through the cracks. And so the idea is that even though I'm showing an email example here, whether it's social media, Slack, Teams, all these other Google, Bing searches, places that links are coming from, we could provide the same level of phishing detection and response. So I'm going to go ahead and click through here. And what you'll see is that page loading and Keepware kind of loading in tandem with it. Why this is a little bit different than what a network security tool would do is because we're not in line. We're injecting ourselves into the page as it's loading. And because of that, we can do a couple unique things. We could tell it's structured like a login page as it's loading. We can tell it's asking for a password. We can tell there's Microsoft resources being used on this site. And then we compare that back to the knowledge that we have of this organization to say very few users in this company have even been to this site. This interaction I showed you was a pause in that it creates friction for the employee. We can put on full page restrictions and other activities as well. But why I show the pause is because that block screen is something that's going to be very common for folks, especially if they're already connected to like a known bad feed or they're using DNS filtering. Where we take it a step further is not just the analysis of the page, but actually tying into different components in the browser to step in real time and say, hey, again, you're the first person in your company to try to log into this site. And so whether it's an upload, download, page visit, login attempt, sensitive copy, paste, and these on-page interactions and even web requests being made from the browser, all of these are individual activities that we've modeled and can write detections and effectively rules and safeguards for. And so this is that first anti-phishing example that we started with, but I'll show a couple other employee-facing examples too.
I really like that idea of you're the first one to try to log into this thing. That's a clever thing because often in spear phishing, there might only really be just one person they're after. So it's like, you're the first and only, but you're the first. No one's ever done this before. Are you absolutely sure this is where you're supposed to be? Well, back when I was at eBay, we actually ran into a situation where somebody sent me a phishing site and they're like, the phishing site's broken or the site's broken. I'm like, what do you mean this phishing site's broken? They're like, it's a phishing site? And like everyone had logged into it. But had the first person tried it and gone, wait, why is this warning me about logging into eBay? Oh, and they look at the URL and go, wait, this is an eBay. I think that would have gone a long way to preventing that type of attack.
Yeah, no, similar to that, and you mentioned eBay. I think of like when I was first learning how to shop online. I was told by my parents, you got to look for the badge on the website, and it's probably just like a JPEG or something that says this is secured payments. And what we're seeing people actually use this for is that we could find not just a phishing page, we could take the company's login page that is known and add a little notice in the top right corner. I'll show you an example of that where you could tell them, hey, this is our site. And it's more of that positive reinforcement. It was the secured by PayPal type of badge, and then it became the green lock, and now they've taken that away. But this kind of gives the company a little bit of a hidden way that they could add those, we call them reinforcements, but to their various logins.
Cool. Okay.
And so that rarity piece kind of ties back to the detection engineering component of Keepware, is that there's a couple hundred fields that you could use like that to design your own detection patterns. We call them patterns, but think of them as detections or policy. Another place where that could be useful is this is what I would see get through other security tools all the time using a free platform. Unfortunately, today I mixed up days and we're recording during B-Sides Austin, and one of our threat researchers is actually presenting on this we call it chain link phishing, but it's this idea of using multiple free platforms back to back to get someone to a phishing page. And even down to a field that's not a password field, we could write a detection that says anything that looks like a password field and is an input on a free platform, we want to have that same exact safeguard that we used elsewhere here too. Um, so again, I would just view everything as an individual activity that could be modeled and safeguarded.
Gotcha.
Quick question
Interesting.
on the you're the first user trying to authenticate here.
Mhm.
Are you doing anything along the lines of, wow, Ryan, you're also the most frequent user trying to log in for the first time all the time. You're clearly a phishing target, whether it's an individual or a group. Are you doing anything along those lines to highlight, target, or zero in on those groups?
It's not maybe not as prescriptive as you described there, but there is a concept of a user risk score, and that can be used as a part of your policy as well. What I'll kind of go back to this once I show another example here, but Keepware is designed to be deployed through profiles or browser profiles. And what we see as common is you'll create a base profile for all of your employees and say, no matter what, you're not going to be visiting the Microsoft, phishing pages or specific campaigns that we push out to customers, things like that. And then they pick out groups that they might want to have a bit more refined policy or exceptions for. This is one approach. Another one we've seen is people taking everyone and then they have a profile for high risk users and they're using that scoring to say this is a bit more locked down. And I'll show you an example here in a profile. We apply this to everyone, or we could create a custom group here, and then we say this is exactly the policy and the safeguards that we're going to be applying to your browser profile. And so there's a set of patterns that we deem best practice. The way we judge our I guess efficacy of this feed is whether all customers are comfortable using it across all employees, and today that's true. We push out specific campaigns like Cloudflare, freemium page phishing pages, or certain attack groups like Bazaar Call. And then, if you want to have your specific policy on top of it, I'm going to show an example of, AI tools usage for this user group. You can add those as well. So, a bit of a tangent there from your question, but the idea is that you could take a group of high risk users and have a bit more locked down state based on that scoring.
Great answer. I appreciate that.
Awesome. So I showed the phishing example, but the next one I have here tied to our profile is AI tools usage. And so across different activities and SaaS usage, we're seeing people adopt these types of acceptable use policies. We hear over and over that training employees once a year on acceptable use really is sometimes meaningless, in that in that first 2 weeks of training, you have a lot of other things that you're doing, in life, get ready for your new job and responsibilities. Usage policies probably the least of your concerns. And so I'll show an example here where I go to ChatGPT, and what we've designed for AI tools in our profile here is that we can communicate. This is customizable. So every 8 hours, or that's a little frequent, maybe every 3 days, we're going to have this reminder. That's the 2-3 bullet points that you're accepting when you use this tool. What I didn't mention before is that any of these safeguards you see, whether it was the card or the tooltip or this usage policy, the company can completely change colors, branding. I'll show an example of that here in a bit. But the idea is that you, regardless of the browser an employee's using, have a company branded web browser that you can enforce these protections on.
Out of curiosity,
oh,
can you detect that they're sending something that they shouldn't be sending? Like, I don't know, something that says company confidential or something like that?
Exactly. So I'm glad you mentioned that. There are sensitive copy paste input data types that you can enforce as well. I'm going to keep it simple. I'm going to put in something like a social security number. And again, everything I typically show in my demo is a notice, because what we're seeing is that there's a lot of these cases that are a bit of a gray area for enforcing policy. And to date, security teams have been left with two options. They either have to block it and kind of suffer the productivity consequences, or they have to allow it and leave themselves open to that risk. So again, this is going to give me the options to undo my paste there, my mistake, even pre-submission, which I think if you're familiar with the DLP space, this is quite a bit different than what the experience you would get if you were doing something inline over the network, waiting for that submission to happen and then hoping you are able to cancel that request or that connection before that data goes out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, interesting. I can see certain situations where it still might slip through, where, like Google search, for instance, which might be doing prefetching based on what they think your search is about to be. But the vast majority of people are not doing that type of like real-time submission stuff just because it's too computationally expensive, and frankly, they don't know how.
Right. And so what I'll show here next is just kind of how this works behind the scenes, and then maybe one more example on the employee side. I mentioned profiles. Those ultimately are made up of patterns, but a profile does a lot more. What we typically start with is this everyone profile, and we say subscribe to best practices. This is your default, browser hardening. It's going to be your phishing and your social engineering protections. We also protect against extensions. So because we're sitting in the browser, we can catalog and even risk score the various extensions in the environment and give a simple way, regardless of what browser the employee is on, to go in and disable or even block different extension use in the browser. Now, this isn't a new capability in that you've been able to do this through group policy for years and years, but the idea is that because each browser is slightly different in how they handle this, we give that, again, that central control plane.
You mentioned browser hardening.
Yeah.
Are you going to do anything along? I guess there are CIS benchmarks around some of those hardening aspects. Are you ticking all those types of boxes as well?
It's not 100% yet. A lot of those CIS benchmarks, they're policy enforcements through group policy, and so
Yep.
we kind of pair with our documentation. Hey, here's what you should do when you install Keepware as well. We do have a bit of a device utility or client that can start to enforce some of those things as well. For example, just where we're sitting, our extension cannot disable something like incognito mode in the browser.
Sure.
But it can tell this device utility to do so. So it a bit of a mixed answer, but today,
That's a fair answer. Yeah, makes
a
sense.
lot of those governance type controls we're just pairing with our Keepware deployment.
Makes sense.
And then there's a couple other things that you can do on the browser. One is, content policy. You can use these categories elsewhere in your detections. I'll show you an example of that. But sometimes it's just as easy as saying we're going to block gambling in our organization and coming in here and doing so.
And how are you getting this, like gambling as an example? Are you pulling in like big lists of known gambling sites? Are you doing it more like trying to figure out what gambling sites look like? Like how do you do that?
Yeah, so another both answer. The core of it is pulling in feeds. Where we've seen that fall short, though, is AI tool usage. Feeds we pull in, we actually rename to AI enabled, because would you call Southwest Airlines an AI tool because they have some sort of a chatbot? Probably not. And so some of these feeds they're very comprehensive, but we've labeled them accordingly. And then we have others where we've classified pages in two ways. One is we do maintain our own list of like the top 50s for different categories, AI tools being an example, ChatGPT. The second one is more of that page detection. In the same way we started with phishing detection and being able to parse the DOM tree as it's loading and just understand this looks sort of like a login page that could be classified as such. AI tools is the same way. By AI tool, we mean kind of this single purpose chat interface. And whether you're in Gemini or Perplexity or ChatGPT, these are structured very similarly in that there's one core input, kind of full screen chat interface, not they're the single page application, so they're generally not scrollable. And so all of that goes into what we would call a selector, and ultimately could be used back in this policy. So we've even seen customers create a detection to block gambling, financial services. So they're highly restrictive on this type of stuff. They use the feed to block gambling. Then they use the keywords that are in the page and push gambling and resort and casino and these others to use that as well. And then they use the selectors on top of it. So multiple levels to try to classify pages even if they're not well known.
Got it. Cool.
And then, of course, other settings here, exceptions. Certain employees in this profile can access, certain file share or drive. But what I wanted to do is just dive into one of these and show an example. The basic one would be AI tools usage. You just saw that one. Me as an employee, I'm visiting category AI tools. It's a page visit event. There's other browser activities that you can detect, extension events, credential use, input, download, upload, copy, paste, individual requests being made from the browser. If we have time, I could show you an example of that. And then you're designing the safeguard for employees. And so even down to, certain variables or markdown, button colors, you could design what you want that interface to look like. And folks really like this capability. They usually kind of create their first, safeguard template. And then they use that for the rest, and it kind of reinforces that company brand. And it honestly, I enjoy it because the policy is not coming from a security tool that the employee doesn't know about. It's coming from their own, team. And while I don't have a stat to prove it, I feel like that's taken a bit more seriously.
Mm-hmm. What sort of telemetry are you sending back to the console? Like, so can I see who is using their browser, how much they're using their browser, where they're going, what they're visiting, that kind of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll go back here to the overview, and once this profile is deployed, the security team has metadata tied to every single activity going in and out of the browser. We're not proxying, tunneling any of this traffic, doing any sort of decryption. And so the nice thing is that you're not getting content back, but you are getting, these couple hundred fields. Again, coming from the network space, I almost call it the packet headers of the browser where, for individual activities like page visit, downloads, uploads, you can go and filter by these and see every single download, upload event, sensitive copy, paste, page visit that's happening in the company. Maybe I want to look into one of these a little bit further. I could go and do so, see source, destination. I could even see, full URL path. I could see download information. It's a JPEG, size, if it matches any of the content filters. We also scan uploads and downloads and do. I don't call this a DLP tool, but there is a bit of a bit of content matching that you could do within the files itself.
And do you have sort of histograms on the user? Because I could also see this being really useful to see people who are quiet quitting or doing mouse jiggling and that kind of crap.
That's where I was going to go. 100%.
Yeah, so the user like profile is something that we're definitely working on, but that's it's kind of a line for us in that we want to stay as a security company, but a lot of folks are using us for employee risk reporting, being able to come in here, narrow down a certain employee and see, what are the top apps this employee is using, how much time are they spending on the apps. It kind of gets tied into the event itself and how long that tab or session was open. So no histogram, but that type of view for an individual employee is definitely coming. We don't necessarily want to be the ones to provide and say, hey, it looks like this user is jiggling their mouse all day. That's not really something that we're concerned with the teams, but they do take that information. We had a case where a client had a call center, and they were able to tell that this call center, just the culture there was a lot different than the rest of their company. I would say, in that they were constantly on Netflix, Hulu, YouTube, as opposed to being in their work software. So those productivity, or just I would kind of abstracted to employee risk, are definitely a lot more present when you're in the browser. And I think a big part of that is because of network security tools today. They tell you source, destination, and how much data is transferred. Maybe there's a concept of time. It's been a little bit of time since I've been in these tools, but the browser's a lot more tied to what an employee is actually doing, clicking on, inputting, searching, prompting, and it's a lot closer tied to identity as well. And so we could get into some more of those SaaS visibility capabilities too.
I'd say in some cases it really is a security problem. It's not just that they're not doing anything all day, but if their job is, let's say, a SOC analyst, and they are not analyzing anything all day, then they are representing a risk to the company, as an example.
Yeah.
So I can see why people are semi-allergic to this, or worried that it'll, out them for a little bit of lack of productivity around Christmas time or whatever. I can see, I get it, right? But there are certain jobs that you just don't get to phone in and pretend like you're working. You know what I mean? So
yeah,
I could see this being extremely useful
point
for something like that.
Yeah, that's a good point. Certain rules, it's a lot more sensitive to be a slacker.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So couple examples. I'll go back to these patterns, and I'll just show this real quick. In that every activity has telemetry tied to it. So even down to, is there a password field on this page? We talked about rarity. We call number of hits that the user has done that interaction on that site in the last 3 months. So it's a bit of a rolling window there too. And so the idea is that you could use all of these in tandem to enforce policy. I'll show one here where I'll go up to my other screen here. I could go in, create a pattern like this, say I want to block an upload, the category, again, using those categories as storage, but maybe we want to make an exclusion for our trusted uploads. This is a custom list that I've built of, Google Drive and some others. If I wanted to maybe change that up a bit, I could say more directly drive.google.com. And then down to a couple other factors, both the data that's being transmitted and also the identity and use when doing so. We could come in here and say, if the file, let me do like sensitivity label of the file. This is pulling from Microsoft Purview, forget what they call it, MISP labels. If it's keepware confidential. That's really what we care about, not going to anything but Google Drive. We've got some other fields, think some of that file specific metadata. So, file name could be one. We'll put that in here and say, I think ours is called KA conversation that I'm about to use here. So it contains KA in the name. And so again, coming back to that first point I made, detection engineering for the browser. This is an upload event happening in the browser that I'm getting really specific on. I could even go down into the identity that's being used in the work application and say, if the account email, the acting user is, I'll just call myself out directly, this could go into our policy. So we've designed it. We've put a safeguard on it. We're going to make this a card. It's going to be a little bit more subtle than just a page block. But then we could go in and, I'll just go to a new window here and show an upload of that file that's got the sensitivity labels. We could, step in that moment and again, support the full on restriction, but also have this pause interaction, say, hey, we don't typically upload sensitive files to Dropbox. This is about to be audited by the, IT security team and logged. Are you sure you want to continue to do this? And have that protection, but also have that trail.
Can you put
what
a delay
on the backside there? Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna quick question. Can you put a delay on the accept so they are forced not to just click through right away? Because a lot of people are just going to want to click through like instantaneously as soon as they see a pop up, but rather just like say, hey, we really don't want you to do this. Like double check your work, read this thing first.
Yeah. That's not something we do, but I really like that idea. It's for the usage policy example too. I wouldn't, we try to balance how often we're messaging, because if you were to do it all the time, it wouldn't be effective. But that could be a way to slow down that interaction and part of that.
And you
make
probably
it a
don't do
real
this.
pause.
Yeah, and you probably don't do this, but I've seen
I was thinking
other
a reason code and explanation as well, right?
Yeah,
Right,
that's a good
right.
idea. The other one that I was
travel
thinking,
policy violation affiliate. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
yeah, the other one I was thinking was, I'm about to do something extremely dangerous. Can you have somebody double check that this is allowed and let them say, yeah, it's okay. Like the page fully stops. Like, nope, like this is way too dangerous. Your boss has to authorize this next move. Kind of like when you're at a cash register and someone has to like open the drawer or something. You got to get the manager to come over and type in the code or whatever. At least then someone has, it's like there's some accountability that it lives outside that person. They can't just get away with anything.
Right. Yeah. That's a good one. I haven't thought of that before. The one that we've put a bit of work into is forcing someone to enter a 2FA code and tying into the identity provider to where that's a lot more friction than like waiting a couple seconds. You would have to go open your phone and say, yep, I want to do this. Some of the prospects and folks that mention this was because they have these SaaS applications that are maybe even built in-house. And if they ask for that feature request from their development team, it's not, critical to producing money in the business. It kind of falls off the roadmap. And if they could just go in and write a simple detection, yeah, this is a bit more permissive of an action within this application. Can we go and restrict it? We could design something sort of like that too.
Okay, Trey, you were about to ask something?
Yeah. So first, the idea of I like the idea of the delay. I like the idea of ask an adult or have someone come and check. I also like the idea of pushing, saying, "Hey, can you explain what you're doing here? Like this is not normal." Rather than simply put the weight of the spirit on them, have them explain what's happening. My question that led me to ask about that was, what happens on the back end when this happens? Is there a webhook where this pops up in the SOX Slack channel or a monitoring channel, or is this like what does the backside of this alerting workflow look like?
Definitely. So if we go into that pattern editor for any event, And we've even had folks that they'll write a detection that just says all events, and they'll forward it to an integration, and they'll say, let's, send this to, uh, we've had people send it to Splunk, Sentinel, any sort of SIM through a webhook, S3 bucket, or just more direct integrations that we've built with like a tool like Darktrace, where that event gets consumed by the tool. Something unique about our integrations is that we allow you to completely transform that event body before sending it off, instead of having to do the mapping in your security tool. So if you have a certain
So you
format, you want
pre-format it.
that.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Right on.
And then,
Yeah,
of
just
course, there's other. Oh, sorry.
I was just processing, a really contrived example. Gosh, Robert, it looks like you're trying to upload a whole bunch of Amazon gift cards and you're sending this to a random email.
Yeah.
What are you doing? Um,
Hmm.
Getting the context back from the user for something you've interrupted, they put in an excuse, a reason code, something to this effect. You're not simply starting with a naked alert for a rule trigger. Like, oh, this is the justification. Here's the thing. Like, we know exactly what we're getting after. It's a running start as opposed to having to start sniffing out and reconstructing what was happening.
Yeah, I could see this being super useful for like HR and finance in particular,
Yeah.
because both of them have a lot of very sensitive information, and if they get duped and they upload the wrong set of files to the wrong people, or log into the wrong thing, you're basically talking about the end of your company, at least for, especially like a small, medium-sized business. Maybe a big business can recover, but the smaller businesses have a really difficult time once they've given over their like Bank of America passwords to these guys or whatever.
Yeah, and the tying to that point, like my background is SOC, and so one of the first features that we made was giving a bit more of insight into this the decisions that were being made by an employee in this time period, and that time to meeting. From an analyst perspective, if I see this alert, I would used to have to go through dozens, if not hundreds, of connection events for a single page visit. And what we show as a part of that alert, and I don't know if you caught that in my last example here, you could go in and mark it to create threat for this event. That's going to add it into this alert queue. You could actually see click by click a 15-minute window. I was in Google. I showed you I went to my mailbox. I clicked that link in my mailbox. Well, what did that link entail? Even
Wow.
down to what was the link text that they clicked on? It was this fake invoice. We do some obfuscation of, certain number strings that you can turn on or off. But the idea is that very quickly, within 2 or 3 seconds, I know exactly what this user was trying to do and where they even received that safeguard or that notice, and that continued through motion.
Ryan, that is very cool.
So what you're doing there is that notice is where you decided that these logs were interesting, and then you surfaced everything leading up to that log. Am I reading that right?
Yep, exactly.
Uh-huh.
And I was going to show another example here. I would have to change environments, unfortunately, but there was one that we pulled from a customer environment, anonymized, and put in our demo, was that you could see that someone was searching for that Facebook space login in their Google search. They opened a new tab, and that 4 or 5 click redirection that we've seen these sites put in front of their login pages to evade other network scanners. We were just along for the ride. We could see how many times this page redirected, that final destination where they received the pause or the safeguard, and in that case it was a block. But the idea is that security team very quickly knew that next step was to educate the person not to search for their login pages over Google or Bing, or just design a pattern where you could even design a pattern, look for an input of something space login for Google and Bing searches, and put a guardrail there where someone can't do that in their Chrome or Bing session.
This is such a thoughtful approach to user behavior coaching and awareness. I mean, obviously you're very well named, but this is legitimately a gentle way of keeping folks aware. I love what you're doing. This is very, very cool.
Hmm.
Appreciate it. Appreciate it. Uh, do we have time for, one more piece here?
Yeah, let's do it. Then we can jump to some of our boilerplate type questions.
Yeah. So, one focus area for us at the start was this like real time component. This event's going to happen. What kind of data could we get from this event, and how could we, effectively stop it or coach or whatever the necessary action is? But there's a whole other side to the platform now that is taking all of that metadata and trying to ultimately take a step back where someone could asynchronously go in and see what is our footprint, what is our risk as an organization. This touches areas like extension management, where we score extensions. You could see which browsers are in use. You could see some of that public store information across different stores like Firefox add-on, the Microsoft Edge extension store, and then the Chrome Web Store. But we've also started to take that step back from a SaaS, and this is almost like that CASB type behavior. But the difference is that because we're in the browser, we could parse a little bit more about the context of the app that they're in. From an identity side, whether 2FA is in use on that application, who in the organization is using 2FA in that sign-in method. More of the SASE side of this tool would be that, tying those different locations to an application and tying all the uploads, downloads, link clicks back to that application. And where we're starting to take this is that, we started with a work identities angle here, one that I'll show. I think I still have it pulled up in my other screen here, is that there's now a concept of business relevance with these applications. Google Drive could be extremely relevant to the business if someone's using their work account and they're uploading to a work drive. But as soon as they switch over to Gmail, that becomes irrelevant or less relevant to the business. And just what we're starting to do is provide a workflow around what is an odd use of that application in your organization based on who's using it. And so I show this Google Drive example to show one of our, this is back to the B-sides point, one of our researchers is showing something today around chain link phishing. And so you could see she was using something on a personal Gmail, and we marked that as low relevance as an application versus the keep aware use of the drive is more legitimate.
Yeah, as you were talking, and actually earlier, I was thinking back to the question about what people are doing all day. It would be really kind of interesting if I could upload like a list of the different like monster.com, dice.com, intuit.com, etc. to see who in my organization is kind of like a flight risk as well. Because there's different sorts of risks to the enterprise, right? Any kind of risk is a risk. And one of the most awful risks to a company is losing some of their best people, or knowing that this person's disgruntled and looking. It's like, okay, how do we sort of manage this person out in a gentle sort of way because they're already looking? It seems like this would be a really nice way to get that kind of telemetry without necessarily, you don't need block pages, you just need detection. Sort of quietly analyzing that.
And there's within a pattern, you can just label the event. That way you can report on it or include in a specific report that you have scheduled out. So you could technically have a flight risk report. And what I'll say is I've seen 3 ways people are using this. 2 are more common. The other one's kind of funny. The first one is the actual sites. So we do have 2 categories for job boards and job seeking, which would be more of not the boards themselves, but sites that can kind of coach or help in that motion. So you could label events for frequent use of a job board. The second one is the actual files. We label personal Gmail activity. And so we'll say personal Gmail upload. And one of the most common types of files that's uploaded is a resume. And so you could design a detection around resume uploads and group those by, destination or by, most frequent user of doing something like that. Um, the third one, this one we stumbled upon with a customer, was an employee using an extension in their browser that would autofill uh, new job applications. It's like
Mm-hmm.
if you combine those three things, that, like you said, that's definitely a flight risk and something that could go into that security angle as well. With maybe they need to be on a more restrictive upload policy or profile, because we expect that they're leaving.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so one of the questions I ask everybody is, what about your app? If maybe you already have one, but if you don't have one already, what about your app do you think you could have some sort of product warranty around, where you believe it works so well that you'd, back it, monetarily because it works that well?
That's a good question. So today we don't have something like that. Um, where where I would say people are most pleased with the consistency is just our uh, telemetry. And so think a page visit, think upload, login attempt. Because of where we sit, uh, if that's showing in our solution, that is 100% happening in the company. And I'll bring an example into this, which is uh, one of the elements I think is special about browser security is that we're the last mile, or sort of the downstream of pretty much every other security tool in the stack from an employee facing perspective. And so
Mm-hmm.
if you have web filtering, if you have a SASE solution, if you have EDR that's doing a bit of DNS, or if you have DLP, if the employee is able to do it in the browser, we can see that follow through. The anecdote here is that we had a case where we did a trial and we showed personal webmail usage. They said, no, we blocked that through our EDRs. Well, let's check again. And it was actually a bug through the unnamed endpoint vendor here, where they said they had a policy to block Gmail and they just weren't. And so all that to say, I think that's probably the place people see the value in this most, is the last mile kind of telemetry and control. So that's very consistent, because when it happens in the browser, it's kind of a matter of fact at that point.
Yeah, it's sort of a defense in depth too, which is nice. So, like,
Right.
let's, as you said, if like I'm blocking Gmail in one way, but if it didn't work, or it somehow got disabled, somebody went in and intentionally disabled it, you could still detect it, which is great, or
Right.
stop it, depending on what you're trying to do there.
Right.
Okay, so anything about your roadmap that you want to share that you think would be particularly relevant for someone listening that might be coming soon?
Yeah. It's this concept of browser as an access factor. It's something that's kind of evolving in the enterprise browser space, and that your browser can be part of the identity flow, so that the use case here at the most basic level would be, you could have an employee um, log in on a personal device, try to connect to work application, and because they don't have KeepAware on their browser um, connected to their organization, they won't be able to log into that application. And so that's I call it browser as an access factor, but I think it connects a lot of what we have on the tail end with detection and response to that very first interface I showed with connecting to work applications. It seems like if the browser is the new endpoint, then it's very, very much needs to be part of that authentication flow.
Mm-hmm.
That's an
Okay,
interesting answer
well,
to the Okta device trust thing. I really like that approach. Like there's a lot of wisdom in that, specifically for traveling or BYOD or extenuating circumstances trying to reconnect and take care of something. That makes a lot of
Right.
sense.
yeah, agreed. I really think that if you double click into the efficacy of your staff, there would be a potentially huge group of people would be very interested in that feature alone, just that feature. Like everything else, yeah, that's just like, that's great, but like also I can, because we're in an interesting era right now where everybody's looking for cost cutting. And if I have, 20, 30, 40, 50% of my staff just not doing anything all day, this would be a really interesting way to at minimum highlight, like, what are you doing all day? Like maybe can we re-incent this person, get them back to working? Or is there maybe they've got some family issues and they're having to take some time off, and or maybe they just, unfortunately, these are the kinds of people who do need to come into work because frankly they just can't be left alone. They don't do what they're supposed to be doing. I think there might be something built into all of that. And then certainly the security aspect, obviously.
Right. I think that's where the security aspect can kind of bridge to that employee experience. One of the comments a customer made about that very first screen where you've got your new tab or homepage is that we might not do any sort of restrictions here. We're just bookmarking something. But what it does is as soon as someone opens their browser, it shows the company logo to them. And so, just that subtle reminder that, oh yeah, I'm in my work browser. It is the work day. I shouldn't Google search what I was just thinking and what I was about to do.
Good point.
I think the safeguards are a good kind of example of that too. It's not like a slap on the wrist when these things show up. They're informative and they can kind of be that coach is kind of thrown around all the time now because of AI, but it could be a bit of
or co-pilot.
Guidance.
There's all kinds of like the guiding light.
Right.
All right. Well, Ryan, we're about out of time here. Oh, why don't you tell us how people get in touch with you and find your company and all that good stuff?
Yep. So to find our company, go to our website, keepaware.com, or on LinkedIn. We've got a couple folks that are a bit more present and posting and our research around some of the campaigns and things that we find. If you want to reach out to me directly, either LinkedIn or ryan@keepaware.com would be the best way.
Great. Well, I really appreciate you coming on, Ryan. This is wonderful. Not quite what I was expecting, and I was pleasantly surprised. So we're always like kind of unaware of what's going to happen, and so this was a really fun one. So I really enjoy that.
I appreciate it.
All right. Well, thanks